Hi everyone, today I am going to be running through some of my top under eye concealer tips and tricks to help you get flawless, natural, non-cakey, non-creasing concealer every single time. This is the most awkward area on the face to cover over, especially if you have dark circles and you're of a certain age, because this is the area where the skin is really thin, it can be crepey, it can have quite a few fine lines and wrinkles on there, and that ride or die concealer that I used to use in my 20s and part of my 30s no longer works for me anymore, and I not only have to change the products that I use but also the techniques in order to get that flawless look that lasts all the way throughout the day. So hopefully by the end of this video you will have the tips and tricks necessary to get that flawless concealer every single day. Let's jump straight into it. If you're new here, hi, my name's Gemma. I upload new videos on YouTube every single week. If you find this video helpful or entertaining, I would love it if you would consider clicking on that subscribe button, the like button, and also the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. Okay, so jumping straight into tip number one, eye prep. This is so important. If you are struggling with your concealer and you are skipping this stage, this is probably where it's all going wrong for you, because it's all about the eye prep. It's all about hydrating the area and making sure that that area is primed to receive the products that you're going to lay on the skin. So always use either an eye cream or a face cream. Either or is absolutely fine. I tend to use an eye cream here, and I haven't mentioned this on my channel before, but recently I've had a little bit of dryness underneath my eyes that I don't have anywhere else on my skin. So I like to use something that's slightly more nourishing, a little heavier, a little bit more hydrating underneath my eye area, and then use a different cream for the rest of my face. So it's not necessary to use an eye cream. You can use a face cream, but if you want to use an eye cream and it works for you, use an eye cream. So the products that I'm really enjoying using at the moment are the Kiehl's Creamy Eye Treatment with Avocado, and then I top that off using some of the NIOD Hydration Vaccine. If my under eyes weren't so tender and dry at the moment, I probably would skip the Creamy Eye Treatment from Kiehl's and go straight in with the Hydration Vaccine from NIOD. The reason I love the NIOD Hydration Vaccine is because it's so heavily siliconed. It really smooths underneath the eyes, as well as adding that hydration to the skin. So you will get that smoothness and that beautiful primed canvas for the rest of your products to sit on top. There are definitely other creams and other primers on the market that will do the job just as well, but these are the products that I am loving using at the minute. Tip 2, find the right concealer that works for you. This can be the most difficult step and the most frustrating and irritating step, because there's a lot of trial and error involved in this. What works for one person might not work for another. But what I would suggest to you is never throw anything away, because you may come across a concealer that is perfect in almost every way, but there are two elements about that concealer that you don't like. Then you can bring in another concealer, become a scientist, start mixing your own concoctions. Now, what I mean by that is I absolutely adore pretty much everything about the Lancome All Over Concealer. The consistency of this is beautiful. It's got a flexibility to this product that allows it to move with my under eye, which means it doesn't crease throughout the day. It's got great longevity. It's really smoothing. It's really hydrating. But I can't get my proper shade in this. The shade selection, even though it's vast, I can't seem to find my correct shade in this, and also this doesn't really have as much coverage as I would like. In comes the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter Concealer. This one has great longevity, it's self-setting, it dries down really quickly, it has super coverage. However, this one is a little bit drying on my skin, and also it's a little bit too light for me. Teamed together, they are the dream team, because the drying aspects of this are counteracted by the hydrating properties in this. This one is too light, which means it lightens this off, which makes it the perfect shade. By mixing these two together, you don't lose the positives of either of the concealers. So I get a concealer that dries down a little faster, that's self-setting, and also it's movable because this one has that flexibility in it. These are my ride or dies and I use these all the time. But had I not kept this one, I would never have known. So don't be persuaded to throw any of your concealers away because you never know when they might come in handy. Moving back to finding the correct products for you, you have to find the correct tone of concealer and also the correct undertone of concealer as well, which can also be a challenge. Now, the undertone of the concealer doesn't need to be your natural skin's undertone. Now, the reason I'm saying that is I'm a big believer in using an under eye color corrector. My personal favorite one is the one from NARS, the creamy under eye corrector. I just think it's beautiful. It has really creamy texture. It's really hydrating. It doesn't budge. It lasts all day, and it has a really lovely applicator which you can be very precise with, so I can paint this directly onto my discoloration very, very accurately. But if you don't like layering a lot of products underneath your eyes, and by the way, using a color corrector, you only need to use the tiniest amount to make the world of difference. But if that still doesn't work for you, try going for a concealer with a peachy undertone. Even if your natural undertone isn't peachy, this will help to cancel out your dark circles. So you'll not only be having a concealer that is a concealer, but it will also help to be a color corrector as well. Let's go back to tip 2, finding the correct products for you, and talk about tone of concealer. I get asked all the time, how much lighter should you be going with your concealer as opposed to your foundation or your natural skin tone if you're not wearing foundation at all? Now, this is a difficult one to answer because it's all about personal preference, and you shouldn't listen to anybody. If you like to go 3 shades lighter with your concealer and you love the look of that, then that's exactly what you should do. I'm going to answer this as to my personal preference. So I only like to go half a shade to a full shade fairer than my foundation shade when I'm doing my concealer. And the reason for that is, although I want that brightening effect that a lighter concealer can give you, I don't want the highlighting effect that a lightening concealer can give you. So I don't want the concealer to highlight my imperfections and really draw the eye in on any fine lines, any wrinkles, any texture. So I would prefer to go the same shade as my foundation or half a shade lighter than my foundation, but that's pretty much it. Now again, it's all personal preference. I really don't want to look like I've been basking in the sun with a huge pair of sunglasses on and then I've taken those sunglasses off and I'm tanned everywhere and then got really white eyes. And believe me, I've done that several times. You live and learn. But yeah, turns out it's not a good look for me. So half a shade lighter is really as much as I like to go. Okay, so we covered quite a lot of ground in tip 2. Tip 2 in hindsight could have probably been tip 2, 3, 4 and 5 and possibly 6 as well. But let's move on to the next tip. Once you've found the products that you want to use very little of them. I mean, I think it goes without saying, I know this is a common sense thing, that the more product that you put underneath your eyes, the more chance of that product creasing and going cakey throughout the day. So apply very, very little. And the way that I would do this, the one way to make sure that you don't apply too much is don't apply concealer directly underneath your eye. Apply it to the back of your hand first and then apply it really, really slowly underneath the eye and build up coverage as you need it. If you apply this directly to your eye, it is a recipe for disaster. It's just asking for trouble, and it's so easy to apply too much if you're doing it that way. Now, there are 2 different ways of applying concealer. You can either apply it throughout this entire section all the way to the corners of the eyes, and that is absolutely fine if that's the way you want to go. If you want a completely flawless look, that's the way that I would do it with a liquid concealer. Or if you find that your eyes are quite problematic, if you get a lot of creasing throughout the day, if your eyes are quite crepey, I would go for a cream product and only apply to the areas that need concealing. So maybe this area here and possibly a little bit here. If I was only spot concealing over discoloration, I would go for a concealer that is the exact same shade as your natural skin tone. And I see all your faces, even though I can't see all your faces, going, no, 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 cream, creasing. If you find the right cream concealer, and I will link some of my favorites in the description box, you will get no creasing. It will look flawless and extremely natural looking, and it will blend superbly into bare skin. So that is definitely the way that I would go. So tip 4, don't shy away from cream products. They are amazing if you find the right ones. Tip 5, regardless of whether you're using a cream concealer, whether you're using a liquid concealer, use your fingers. Your fingers are absolutely amazing. Now, you don't need to use your fingers straight off. If you'd rather apply the concealer with a brush to be accurate, that is absolutely fine. It's not the way I do it, but there's nothing wrong with that. Once you've got your concealer in place with a brush though, if that's the way you choose to do it, always go over with your fingers, because the heat from your fingers will really melt that concealer into the skin and make it one with the skin. This will create the most beautiful, flawless yet natural look. You won't see your concealer at all because it will be melted into the skin. It's definitely the way to get perfect concealer every single time. Tip 6 on getting flawless yet natural under eye concealer. I tend not to take my concealer all the way up to that lower lash line. The reason I don't do that is there's natural discoloration underneath those lashes anyway, and there's also a little bit of shadow. So by taking your concealer all the way up to those lower lashes, you're not only making your concealer look heavy and noticeable, but you're also making your under eyes look slightly more unnatural than is necessary. I always miss that section out and just have a little bit of natural discoloration poking through. If I don't like it, I tend to just run a little bit of eyeshadow underneath those lower lashes. It will still give you that shadow and discoloration to make it look natural, but it might cover up a little bit more of that pigmentation if you don't like the look of it. But usually I just stay like this. And today I haven't even got any mascara on those lower lashes and I still think it looks really natural. Tip 7, if you need a little bit more coverage, what I would suggest that you do is allow the concealer to sit on the surface of the skin for a couple of minutes before you blend it out with your fingers. That way some of the water has evaporated already and the product has started to set slightly before you start blending it out, and you will get more coverage from the product that way. So without applying more product over the top, you're actually getting the coverage that you want from the product that previously didn't give you that much coverage. It really does work. And finally, tip 8, setting your concealer in place. Now, this isn't always necessary. If you find the right concealer combination, you may realize you don't need to set it in place with a powder or a setting spray at all, and it just stays looking true for hours and hours and hours, and it doesn't crease and it doesn't look cakey throughout the day. Even though my concealer combination does all of those things, it is beautiful, it has great longevity, it doesn't crease, I still feel like I need that extra bit of assurance that it's going to stay true for an incredibly long amount of time, because I am not good at looking in a mirror and checking my face throughout the day. I'm extremely lazy. So I like to set my concealer in place regardless. I have a few tips for setting your concealer in place. Number 1 is make sure your concealer is completely dry before you go in with any sort of powder or setting spray. Not only the top layer needs to be dry, but the underneath layer. If you've built this up, you need to make sure that all layers of the concealer are completely dry. Otherwise, you're just going to apply powder over the top, and anything that's damp underneath will suck in that powder. It will dry out the concealer and it will just look a cakey mess throughout the day. There's also more chance of your concealer creasing throughout the day if you set it when your concealer is still slightly damp. So always make sure that your concealer is completely dry before you go in with a powder. My second tip for setting your concealer in place is to use a damp blending sponge. I like to douse my sponge in water and get rid of every single last drop of water from the sponge so it is only slightly damp. And then for extra assurance, I spray over a little bit of setting spray onto my sponge. Do the same thing again, make sure it's only damp, not completely wet, and then go in with a powder. You'll find that by doing it this way, you'll not only set the concealer with the use of the powder, but you'll also melt that powder into the skin with the setting spray, and that setting spray will also give your concealer more longevity throughout the day. And my final tip for setting your concealer in place is to dip your damp blending sponge into your powder and then do not go straight into the under eye. Make sure that you're dabbing any excess powder off on the back of your hand. That way you're not getting globs of powder underneath the eye. You're definitely not going to introduce too much powder underneath the eye area. You don't need a lot of powder to set your concealer in place. Once you've dabbed it off on the back of your hand and you can't see the powder on your sponge anymore, that's when I go in underneath my eye and set my concealer in place. So that's it for this video. I really hope you found it helpful. I hope you're going to be able to implement some of these tips and tricks into your everyday makeup routine just to make it easier to get perfect, flawless, natural, non-caking, non-creasing concealer every single day, every single time. These are just little tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way as my skin has changed. My techniques and my products have had to adapt to counteract the changes in my skin. So this is what's working for me at the moment, and I thought I would share. So let me know what you've thought about this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye everyone.